What if the very thing you're desperately trying to escape right now, boredom, didn't exist for 99% of human history? Not because ancient humans had more excitement, but because their brains weren't wired to experience time the way yours does. No phones, no Netflix, no music on demand, no scrolling to kill 5 minutes in a waiting room. And yet, somehow, they didn't lose their minds. So what were they actually doing during all those empty hours? The answer is stranger and more brilliant than you'd expect. Because to understand how cavemen survived boredom, we first need to understand something uncomfortable. Boredom, as you experience it, might actually be a modern invention. Let's rewind. 200,000 years ago, a small band of early humans sits around a dying fire. No screens, no books. Just darkness stretching out in every direction, filled with sounds they can't identify. You'd think this would be torture. Your brain, wired for constant novelty, is screaming right now, just imagining it. But here's the twist. Their brains weren't wired like yours. Not because they were less intelligent, because their environment trained their minds differently. Modern life has quietly rewired how we process time itself. We now live inside a constant stream of stimulation, notifications, videos, conversations, advertisements. Our brains have adapted to expect input every few seconds. So when that input disappears, even for a moment, something strange happens. Your brain interprets silence as a problem to be solved immediately. That restless, itchy, uncomfortable feeling? Psychologists call it high arousal negative affect. In plain English, your brain is basically saying, absolutely not. But early humans didn't have that same reflex. Their nervous systems evolved in a world where nothing happened for long stretches of time. Waiting, watching, listening. And that waiting wasn't wasted time. It was survival training. Because doing nothing, quite literally, kept them alive. Think about hunting. A hunter tracking prey doesn't get constant excitement. They spend hours in silence, watching a single trail, waiting for the smallest sign of movement. If their brain demanded constant stimulation the way yours does, they would have starved. So evolution favored something remarkable. Minds that could sit inside stillness without panicking. But that's only half the story, because stillness isn't the same as emptiness. Here's what almost nobody realizes. The ancient human brain wasn't idle during those quiet hours. It was working overtime, just in a different direction. Neuroscientists have a name for what happens when your body goes quiet, but your mind doesn't. It's called the default mode network, a system in your brain that activates specifically when you're not focused on the outside world. This is where memory, imagination, and problem solving actually happen. In other words, when ancient humans sat by that fire doing nothing, their brains were running simulations, replaying the day's hunt, rehearsing tomorrow's plan, imagining threats, inventing stories to explain the stars. Their boredom, if we can even call it that, was productive. Modern humans rarely let their minds wander this way anymore. The moment silence arrives, we reach for a screen and shut the process down before it starts. It's like evolution accidentally left a bug in the system, and modern technology found the exploit. But ancient humans didn't have an escape hatch, so their minds had nowhere to go except inward and outward together. And that's where the real magic begins. Because if you think ancient humans just sat there quietly staring into space all day, you're about to be surprised. They built entire universes of entertainment, just not the kind you'd recognize. Picture this. A cave. Somewhere in what is now France, 40,000 years ago. By the flickering light of an animal fat lamp, someone presses their hand against the stone wall and blows pigment around it. They're not doing this for survival. There's no practical reason for this image to exist. They're doing it because their mind needed to create something, to leave a mark, to say, I was here, I saw something, I felt something. This is one of the oldest forms of entertainment we've ever discovered. And it wasn't passive. It was active, physical, deeply personal storytelling. Cave art like this appears across the world, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, always emerging the moment humans had spare time and a spark of imagination. And painting was just one piece of it. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose lifestyles closely resemble our ancient ancestors, have found something fascinating. Free time wasn't filled with silence. It was filled with talk. Endless, elaborate, wildly entertaining conversation. Gossip, jokes, arguments. Myths passed down for generations. Anthropologist Polly Weissner studied the Jew/Huanzi people of the Kalahari Desert and found that daytime conversation was mostly practical complaints, plans, negotiations. But nighttime conversation, once the sun went down and hunting stopped, transformed into something else entirely. Stories, legends, performances around the fire that could stretch for hours. Firelight, it turns out, may have done something to the human brain that we're only beginning to appreciate. Some researchers argue that the shift from daylight practicality to nighttime storytelling helped build social bonds, transmit cultural knowledge, and yes, provide entertainment long before television existed. In a very real sense, the campfire was humanity's first streaming platform. But here's where things get weird, because storytelling and art explain some of it, but they don't explain everything. There's another ingredient we haven't talked about yet. Something so basic you've probably done it today without thinking. Play. Not just children playing. Adults too. Wrestling, games of chance, throwing contests, rhythmic clapping, and early forms of music using bones, sticks, and stretched hides as drums. Music in particular appears remarkably early in the archaeological record. Flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory dating back at least 40,000 years have been discovered in caves in Germany. Someone, sitting in flickering torchlight, carved holes into a bone with precision, testing pitch, adjusting spacing, chasing a sound that didn't yet exist. That's not survival. That's curiosity turned into art. And curiosity, it turns out, might be the real secret ingredient behind all of this. Human brains are unusually reward-driven when it comes to novelty and discovery. Every time you learn something new, solve a small puzzle or create something with your hands, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical linked to pleasure and motivation. Modern apps exploit this system ruthlessly, feeding you tiny hits of novelty every few seconds. But ancient humans got their dopamine the slow way, by carving, by painting, by inventing games, by perfecting a spear throw, by learning which plants healed and which ones killed. Their world was already full of built-in puzzles, and solving those puzzles was entertainment in itself. This changes everything about how we think of ancient life. It wasn't a struggle against endless, boring hours. It was a life saturated with problems to solve, stories to tell, and skills to master, using nothing but sticks, stone, fire, and imagination. Now you'd think that's the end of the story. humans figured out clever ways to entertain themselves. End of documentary. But evolution had another twist waiting. Because boredom itself, the very discomfort we're trying to explain, might not be a flaw in human design. It might be one of our most important survival tools. Psychologists studying boredom today have found that it isn't simply the absence of stimulation, it's a signal, a push. Boredom exists to motivate change, to make you seek out new environments, new challenges, new information. For ancient humans, that restlessness likely pushed them to explore new territories, invent new tools, and solve problems that kept their species alive and expanding across the planet. In other words, boredom may be one of the quiet forces behind human migration, innovation, and creativity itself. The discomfort you feel scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., desperately searching for something new, is the exact same ancient mechanism that once pushed your ancestors to cross oceans, domesticate fire, and paint on cave walls. Nature clearly didn't get the memo that we'd eventually build machines that could exploit this mechanism 1,000 times a day. So here's the real twist hiding underneath this entire story. Cavemen didn't defeat boredom by avoiding it. They survived boredom by transforming it into art, into music, into stories, into connection, into discovery. The tools were different. Bone flutes instead of Bluetooth speakers, cave walls instead of camera rolls, firelight instead of blue light. But the underlying need was identical to yours. The need to create, to imagine, to connect, to explore. Which raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with long after this video ends. If your ancestors turned empty hours into cave paintings, music, and legends that survived tens of thousands of years, what exactly are you turning your empty hours into? If you enjoyed exploring this mystery, subscribe to the Primal Logic for more fascinating stories about humans, nature, science, and the hidden reasons behind the world around us.